Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale as well as the latest episode of Happy. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when to start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Riverdale, you can skip what I say about this week's episode of Happy. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Riverdale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's start off with Archie's situation. Obviously, you know, Archie wants to take this whole boxing thing a lot more serious. Veronica's even willing to put forth the money to get the gym fixed up and everything, get him set up in some regional fights and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting because later on it comes up like, oh, the regional fight got pushed up. Maybe nothing ever came about that being like, oh, there was something behind it. Part of me was like, I just thought it was kind of interesting. It just happened to get pushed up. Part of me was like, I wonder, was that just like the universe kind of, you know, being against Archie with everything going down, or was there like more to that? Part of me thought maybe it's going to be like a thing of like maybe Ilio or Hiram might be behind that, but it seems like that might not be the case. Who knows? Either way, he wants to do this, but his mom doesn't want to sign the form that'll let him do it, so he forges her signature. Because for her, it's like, the fact is, she didn't even want him playing football, but he did. But now, like, boxing being what it is, it could be so violent and stuff, and she doesn't want Archie to get messed up. I mean, we've seen Archie in fights in the boxing ring. He's gotten pretty messed up from the whole situation. So, obviously, she's a mom, so obviously she's going to be scared. But for Archie, like, for him, it's like, this means the world to him because for him, like, once again, Archie's lost and he's trying to find his way, and boxing has kind of presented itself as a way for him to find his way again, you know? And, you know, he ends up, you know, there's a situation where she ends up calling this naval recruiter named Brooke that she knows. Interestingly enough, that actress, I'm blanking on her name, but she was in Continuum. She played Garza, and I'm blanking on her character's name. She was the mayor most recently in that TV show Ghost Wars. I think that was from last year. Or that was from like the year before last. I can't remember. Either way, so there's that. But Archie was kind of in a situation of, one, he had to lose like 6 pounds before he could be in the weight necessary to go into the regional fight. But then, you know, he was also double booking because he also had to fight Fangs to show the recruiter what he was capable of doing. Obviously, he ended up losing a regional fight, which obviously that hit Archie a lot because it's like, yeah, that was a step forward to do that. But it's like in the long run, to be fair, he wasn't in peak condition. He had kind of been starving himself, working himself out like crazy just to lose that weight in that short amount of time. So it's not like he was on his best game, and by the time it came to the fight, which Veronica was trying to like talk him out of it, he ended up passing out. And obviously, you know, it's that thing of, you know, for Archie, it's like he doesn't, because for him, joining the military would mean that he'd be missing out on a lot of prime years for boxing. For him, it's like, you know, even like college is kind of something he's not so sure about, just because obviously, like when he was locked up, you know, in juvie, like he missed so much. It was so hard for him to catch back up and everything. So for him, he feels like college isn't where he's supposed to be. It's like, I want to see these fists take me as far as they can. But, you know, in his mom's eyes, like, you're looking for what's, you know, just tomorrow. That's what you're looking forward to. I'm trying to look for longevity, and you're like, trying to give you a career in case things don't work out. That's what she's aiming for, you know? And, you know, I think Archie does understand that, but in the end, with everything kind of going down, you know, his mom does understand that, like, it's actually kind of a good thing you're doing this whole boxing thing. And she's even just saying that they'll talk to, you know, Fred about the whole situation. And so, which, you know, sadly brings me to a conversation, because I didn't realize this until after I'd already recorded everything last week, but apparently last week's episode, from what I was reading, was the last episode Luke Perry had recorded, apparently, which I didn't realize at the time. And so obviously they have like, oh, he's away, you know, in this particular episode. So my thought has always been, ever since, you know, the news, I'm like, how they'll probably handle Fred's story in this will probably be like, he'll pass away. Like, it might be the fact that he's away, it might be like a car accident or something. Just because I think, and how they'll probably wrap it into the story is, remember, Fred was very young when he lost his dad too. He was about Archie's age, and I think that's probably how they'll circle back that around, especially considering the fact that his mom's back in Riverdale too. So I think she's going to be there to kind of feel that role to a little bit. Like, beyond that, at least for now, beyond that, like, it's sad because, you know, this is just going to cause obviously Archie more pain. Like, you know, that's where I'm thinking they're setting this up, but I could be wrong. That's just kind of how my mindset's been about it. It's just kind of, Yeah, like I said, I didn't realize last week's episode was the last one he had recorded before he passed. So, but there's that. So kind of a bit of sad news to kind of, or at least thoughts about that whole situation. So there's that side of things, and another side is the whole conversation about Hal. It's kind of interesting because Betty kind of jumped to the same conclusions I jumped to last episode, being like, Hal had to have faked this whole situation, didn't he? Like, he actually got away. That was one part of my brain. The other part of me was like, oh, could, like, the farm be behind this? But we'll get to that soon enough. Because Betty was convinced, like, oh, this whole thing was him staging his escape. Because it's interesting, because obviously Betty's been communicating with her dad, because I think, he was there for her at a time where, so much was being taken away from her because of the farm and everything. And so, in the long run, you can see her kind of a little conflicted, because there's part of her, scared that, oh, here's a serial killer on the loose again. But then there's another side of her, I think that's still kind of like, no matter what the circumstances are, that's still my dad. So I think she has very complicated feelings just because of how much time they spent together recently, because it also makes her feel bad because it's like, oh, he manipulated me into orchestrating everything, but it's like, no, one of the handprints came back as Hal, so it's like, oh, he's still alive. I'm like, I still don't, he had died, but I'm like, I don't buy that. And obviously everything that Jughead and Betty had orchestrated, because I love that whole conversation of like, oh yeah, like prom is today, and it's like, oh, prom is coming up, and it's like, and even Veronica being like, do we actually still do that here? It's like, yeah, Riverdale's been through a lot of stuff. You wouldn't think something as quote unquote mundane as prom would still be something, especially everything that's going down. But it's like, oh, and you have Betty acting all cute about asking Jughead to go to prom with her and everything. It's just like, just shut up, you two, and stop being so damn adorable. And then there's obviously the awkwardness of like, Archie and Veronica kind of look to each other but don't say anything, but he asks her later on, it's like, oh no, we'll just go as friends. And it's like, yeah, sure. It's like, she's like, yeah, I'd like that. It's like, yeah, we'll see how long the just friends situation is going to stand. We'll see. I think it won't be long until the flames of love rekindle, but we'll see in the long run. But obviously Betty, like, we end up finding out that like Kurtz had just gotten a tattoo. The symbols on his back are needed for Ascension, and so the whole thing, they went to the tattoo artist. He talked about the fact that he had gotten someone the tattoo on someone like a year earlier. Now, there's a lot of interesting things to kind of break down about this, because obviously everything apparently ends up being a trap. Everything they read in that gospel ended up being a trap. I guess maybe it was, but the thing is, because it was something that, Jughead had found, but maybe that's not the real gospel, because that's what Jellybean and Ricky were supposed to be looking for, not unless that was just some excuse. She thought it was like part of the real game, but it was just some trap to kind of get her where they needed her to be. But in actuality, like, there might not actually exist a gospel, or maybe there is. It's hard to say. And that in itself kind of goes, okay, so how much of this was a lie? Was the whole thing about the tattoo on the back thing a lie about there being someone else that had gotten it like a year earlier? Obviously, Betty assumes it's Edgar, which my money was on that too, but then Edgar so confidently takes his shirt off and shows that's not on his back. Which I will note, which I think is kind of an interesting detail, the tattoo artist never said he got the tattoo on a dude's back. Like, I think everyone just made that assumption, Jughead and Betty did. So who's to say Edgar doesn't have the tattoo and it's just somewhere else on his body? It could be on his, like, his thighs, his legs, That's my mindset about it, but... Or not unless he ended up getting it covered up sometime later, but I wouldn't think you would. I wouldn't think it's makeup either, because I feel like that would have showed up on his shirt, but, So like I said, my mind immediately goes, like, it's got to be somewhere else on his body if it's not him. I don't know. It's that thing of, like, since the beginning, it's always been like, oh yeah, like, the mindset, and even the show itself is kind of making you go... The whole farm situation as well as the Gargoyle King situation have to be connected, or are they two separate things? I believe they are the same thing, just because of everything that goes down. Obviously, Betty, trying to set up the whole prom queen situation so they can summon the Gargoyle King. He's actually there, but Betty's by herself, and she gets chased by the Black Hood, which even that, I'm like, okay, so is that actually... the Black Hood? Is that really Hal, or is that someone pretending to be him because the real him is dead and now they're keeping it and make it look like, oh, Hal faked his death, so they're just going to be looking for him instead of someone else? I mean, obviously there's been other people who've, been set up to be the Black Hood when they weren't. So, that in itself kind of begs the question, like, you don't know how much is truth and how much is fiction in this whole situation. So, because if it is how, why would he attack Betty like that? And then it's like, oh, so this was all deception on his part, and apparently him and the Gargoyle King are working together. But why would he, considering the fact is that the Gargoyle King is planning to adopt his grandchildren? He seems so against it, but maybe that was part of the con. Maybe the fact of the matter is maybe Edgar had actually gotten to Hal before now. Just because of Alice, he was able to get to him. I wouldn't assume so, because Hal doesn't seem like I feel like, why would Hal, be so against the farm if it was like part, I mean, I guess it makes sense if he was trying to play some role in the sense of kind of letting Betty's guard down. Because my thought process is everything that went down pushed Betty closer to the farm, because Edgar's like, why don't you stay here? We have the rank and numbers. We'll protect you and your mom. Which obviously Betty could probably use as an opportunity to get closer to the farm and have an excuse to be inside their walls. But part of me thinks, like, if that was Hal, maybe there's other ulterior motives for the situation. Maybe he did get recruited, or the real Hal is dead, that, with their resources or whatever connections, maybe the farm was able to cover that whole situation up. They orchestrated everything. I have no idea. My mind is running in 100 different directions when it comes to this whole situation. So in the end, we'll kind of have to wait and see. I thought it was kind of interesting, kind of tying this all together, like the whole, like, Cheryl, wanting to be prom queen and everything. And it's like me and Tony, co-monarchs. It's like, it's kind of a no-brainer, but she can't do it, because even Evelyn was like, the fact of the matter is, the farm is all about equality, and it's all about us as one. And so her doing that, well, for one, and just putting herself out there as kind of like separating herself from the pack, and that's not something they go for. And I love Cheryl being snappy, because even being a part of the farm, she's still her fiery self of being like, yeah, and what about you, Evelyn? How old are you? Aren't you like 30? How many proms did you go to? Throwing that in her face. I love it. It's like, basically, you can choose the embrace of, the farm and kind of being enlightened and ascending, or you can choose to be prom queen for one night. And Cheryl's like, why not both? Which then she talks to Edgar, which Edgar puts it simply, if you can't, if you want to, pick something as trivial as being prom queen above everything here, it's like, then we just can't let you stay here. We can't let you talk to your brother anymore. And Cheryl's like, okay, I got it. So, but even now, Cheryl's being like, yeah, I don't think the farm is quite where I want to be anymore, which is so interesting. I guess it's, it's like, Edgar's got his powerful spell and everything, obviously, however he is, obviously manipulating these people into thinking they're seeing their loved ones and everything. But in Cheryl's case, once again, she's too, like I brought up before, which once again, I was super surprised for her to fall under his spell and everything. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, Cheryl's too stubborn. And I feel like that's kind of creeping through a little bit. She's even telling Tony, like, we'll see how long she decides to kick it with the farm for now. Also, it's got to probably hurt a little bit, because obviously she wants to be prom queen and everything. But not only was the person that won Betty, let's not forget Betty's her cousin too, so that's got to sting a little bit to a certain extent. But it's more so like, well, the fact is she won because I wasn't in the competition, because if I was in the competition, obviously I win. That's kind of how I feel like Cheryl would probably look at it, so. Some very, very interesting developments on that front as well. So, I mean, because that's the only thing I can think about, like, why the Gargoyle King chose Betty, Because it's interesting, because it's the whole cycle thing, too. Because the whole conversation that Jughead had in his head was like, well, the fact of the matter is, if it's Edgar, he couldn't have been the Gargoyle King that your mom saw all those years ago with the Midnight Club. But Betty's thought was like, well, the fact is he has all those testimonies from mom, so maybe he heard about the Midnight Club and decided to use the whole Gargoyle King persona thing. I don't know. Part of me is thinking, like, this has to be like a family thing. Like he told his past, but I'm sure, like, maybe the person he met, the one who brought him up into this whole farm situation, was the original Gargoyle King. He said it was a lady, but I mean, who's to say the Gargoyle King could be a lady, and now he's adopted a persona, or maybe that whole backstory he gave Betty in that episode was complete horseshit, and the fact of the matter is the real backstory involves, like, this legacy. Just like Hal has his legacy of being the righteous person that he is, maybe that's why they are kindred spirits in this, because they both believe that they're on this holy cause. Maybe if, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see where all that ultimately ends up taking us. The point I was also making, I almost got sidetracked, was like, I just thought it was kind of interesting, because obviously, like, you have a cut between, obviously, like, Alice, when she was Betty's age on, Ascension Night, and then like cutting to Betty, like both confrontations with the Gargoyle King to a certain extent, like that moment leading up to it, kind of cutting back and forth between the time periods between Alice and Betty, like that. I thought it was kind of neat, and that's why I'm kind of like, it's interesting because it's kind of come full circle in that same regard, and it's like, why have they taken such an interest in Betty amongst anyone, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's just Betty. It also seems like there's interest in Jughead, too, just because of everything that went down with Kurtz. Still not 100% sure why Kurtz got killed. Like I brought it up last episode, chalked it up to be he kind of bent the rules, and the Gargoyle King is very particular about the rules and the way things are played. It's like, these are the rules in the game. You break those rules, you die. I don't know. Or maybe that was... I took it as that, but maybe that was his final goal, and he finally got to ascend, potentially. So... that's something to think about. I have no idea. I'm so interested to see where all this takes us going forward. There's only 2 episodes left this season, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where they end up taking us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Happy. Holy crap, a lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Let's start off with everything going on with Happy and Bo Peep, them spending time with each other. I liked it that Bo Peep was kind of getting a little annoyed that all he kept doing was talking about Haley, but the thing is, it's like, well, Haley, she's not even thinking about you. That's what kind of friends are they? They just up and kind of grow up and forget about us, so they go back to Nick's place. And she's asking if Happy's ever done it. And it's like, yo, are we really having this conversation, dude? It's actually kind of interesting because that whole conversation with Bo Peep brought up something very interesting. What Happy did going from one person to another is unheard of. Because Bo Peep was like, wait, no, that's weird. That doesn't happen. Like, someone going... Because remember... when Haley forgot about him, he disappeared, but he reappeared with Nick. So it's like, okay, so there's definitely something more there. I mean, typically they don't stick with adults anyway, but there have been exceptions. Obviously, BB can see him. Obviously, Santa from last season could also see him. But I guess that's because they have like childlike heads. But the thing is, it's still not even a situation of like, oh, you were their imaginary friend, but they never grew up. It's like, no, you were Haley's, and then you went to Nick. So she's like, that would, I mean, because if we could do that, that would mean we're not imaginary, right? Which is like, which begs the question, maybe they're not imaginary friends. Like, maybe they are something else. Maybe they are creatures from a different world that manifest themselves like this, that maybe there's a lot more going on than just being like imaginary friends. I don't know. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. It kind of ties into something Nick was talking about earlier in the episode where he was just kind of like, just kind of like all the weird stuff I've been through, Meredith. You might as well just chalk it up to be like, it doesn't matter. Just basically almost like they're probably talking to the audience of like, stop asking questions. It is what it is. Leave it at that. Maybe not. Maybe that's just me reading too much. It'd be funny if that was kind of what that's supposed to represent. Like, yeah, who cares of why things are the way they are? The world is wacky. Let's leave it at that. So, but nevertheless. And then, she's asking, like I said, she's asking if he's ever done it. Like, the fact is, has he ever, tasted his own horn or something like that? He's like, what? No, I don't think I'm built like that. But he's like, if I could, I'd never leave the house again because it tastes like banana. And she asking if he's done it. He's like, well, yeah, of course, multiple times. And then it turns into a weird thing of like, she's popping off his horseshoes to his hooves, and he's like, wait, those can come off? She's like, that's not the only thing coming off. I'm like, this is the weirdest fucking thing we're about to watch. Not just about to, we literally kind of watched imaginary friends bang. That's some next level shit. I would have never thought that would have ever happened. That's crazy. And apparently she was on top of Happy's horn, and things were moving, shaking and vibrating, and then he splooged like rainbow goo everywhere. It's like, Jesus, what the hell am I watching? This show, it's so weird and crazy, and I love it. Holy crap. That's interesting. I guess things are kind of building up between them of potentially being more than that. Because she's kind of basically trying to get Happy to kind of leave his comfort zone. Because obviously he's kind of very codependent. He relies on a lot of people, But now it's kind of like, kind of forgetting a little bit about Haley. It's like, oh, Nick, who cares where Nick is? He's probably doing something boring anyway. So that was an interesting turn of events on Happy's side of things. Then we go to everything going on with Amanda, which was interesting. because she went to go see Sunny Shine, and it turns out she's pregnant, and I'm like, it could be Simon's baby, but I highly doubt it. I'm like, the baby has to be one of the, that's because you know, Sunny Shine ended up talking to the Wishies, and they were like, oh, that Amanda's special, and I was like, oh, she's pregnant with one of them, like the sex orgy party, like something must have happened there, and she must have gotten impregnated by one. So I guess maybe they probably can't reproduce naturally. So this is probably like a very rare occasion. I even love it later on. She gets to go check out, and Julie's like, oh, the fact of the matter is you have option 1. You can keep the option 2, give it up for adoption. She's like, what about my third option? Oh, you mean murder? I'm like, wait, are we going down this route? And they sure as hell did. And she's just kind of like, the fact of the matter is, oh, this baby, I bet she's going to look like you, and, you know, God's good graces and stuff like that. I'm like, yo. And even Julie going as far as being like, you get, like, the fact of the matter is being like, oh, you shouldn't get an abortion because the fact of the matter is you're like 87% more likely to get like cervical cancer or something like that. It's like, Jesus. And also, like, when we scoop out the baby or whatever, it's like, which I don't know if she even used the word scoop. That might just be me adding that in there, which even more, like, the word scoop under this circumstances is super fucked up. But it's like, when we can't even cut out all the baby, that sometimes limbs kind of get left in there. It's like, Jesus. Even Amanda's like, what the fuck? And then Julie's like, you got an 11-year-old, right? How would she feel about you killing her brother or her little brother or sister? He's like, Jesus. And Amanda's like, fuck you, Julie. I was like, holy shit. Like, to be fair, like, that in itself is a whole conversation, which is like, you know, I'm not trying to get political and everything. I kind of, it's a person-to-person basis. I didn't always kind of view things like that. When I was younger, I had my own opinion about it, kind of being super against it. But now it's like, at the end of the day, like, who am I to tell someone what they can do with their body? I feel the way I feel, but, you know, it's a complicated subject in my opinion, but it's like, it's someone's body. Who the hell am I to tell a lady what she should do with her body? That's the whole conversation. But the way they handled it, I was like, Jesus. So that was interesting. I'm curious to see what ends up happening with that whole situation with Amanda. Like, I wonder, did she just happen to walk into like a very religious clinic, or was it just the fact is, or was there more to it? It seemed like it might have just been a religious clinic, but we'll see. What's that situation going to be like when she potentially gives birth to a Wishy? Like, what's that going to look like? Is that going to take a toll on her? Like, were the other Wishies born like that? Are they from another dimension? Could they be from the same place that Happy and all the other imaginary friends are from? And it's not something that really gets brought up a little bit. Because, like, Happy brought up, like, oh, yeah, his imaginary background back in season 1. But beyond that, we don't know if it's, like, is that really, really where he's from? Like, the imaginary land that he's claiming to be from, like the planet he was from. Like, he said stuff like that back in season 1. So I'm wondering, is that the truth, or is that just background that him and Haley come up with? Like, that's still something that hasn't been tackled. But once again, it's the whole thing of, like, who knows if they'll actually go that far. But it's something interesting to kind of think about. So I'm curious where that goes. There's a whole Nick and Meredith thing. I love that they were in those Wishy suits and ended up fighting. I didn't expect it to be Nick in the other one. And Meredith dropped her gun in the bottom of her suit, lifted up her foot, and ended up shooting Sax. I even loved them doing the diagram breakdown about what happened and just how much of an impossible shot it was. And then they kidnapped the Wishy thing, and I love it. They were about to cut it in half. I was about to say, like, the way its legs were and everything. I was like, isn't that thing upside down? And it's like, oh, you started with the sweet spot. And it ended up busting out and running away. So I'm wondering, where the hell did that thing go? Or did it get back to Sunny Shine? Or is it out there lost on its own? I have no idea. I wasn't later on when they pop up. I didn't think to myself, like, oh, I should look to see how many of them there actually are at that time. But nevertheless, I love they run into Ledik. And he's like, oh, the bug putting out a hit on Nick. And the fact is, he always hooked me up with that. What was he said? He was referencing pie, and he was like, but what by pie, I mean, I think he literally said by pie, I mean pussy. And Meredith's like, yeah, I got it. And then it's just kind of like, Ledik is like, the fact of the matter is, he knows about this whole situation, the sex, party, orgy and stuff like that, because he got mixed up in that himself. Because the whole reason why he doesn't want to work with Bug, because it's like, oh, he's a different breed. And Nick is like, oh, honor among scumbags. He's like, exactly. He's not like us. It's like, okay. I love that there's like a scumbag set of honor and rules. But him being like, oh yeah, he went to one of those parties and it was crazy and he literally shit his hands. And then it was like, yeah, he promised he wouldn't go there again, but then he ended up going like 6 or 7 more times, and Meredith's like, Jesus. So he's willing to hook Nick up with a way into the party, while Nick also has to deal with the whole Haley situation. He had this very heart-to-heart moment with Haley I thought was kind of neat, where he was like apologizing because Haley's birthday wasn't just like for the fact he's forgot it, because it's something I didn't even think about. This is Haley's first birthday as them being father and daughter, with him in her life and her in his. And so it's that thing of like, I should have been there because this was super important, and he's trying to make up for it, but it doesn't make up for it because, you know, Nick is trying his best, but his best kind of not good enough, especially with everything that Haley's going through. You have Smoothie showing up there in front of Nick, and Nick's like, oh, I'm so glad that you're alive because now I get to kill you myself. But then he starts talking about Haley and kind of pissing Nick off. Like, the thing is, Nick is in a complicated situation. If anything happens to Smoothie, Haley's just going to automatically be like, no, you can't hurt my friend, and probably get in the way of it. Because even being like, oh, are you really willing to traumatize your daughter more than you already have? Like, after everything she's been through, you're willing to just kill me in front of her and cause her even more problems? Plus, he's also trying to be a good dad and everything, too. So for him, it's like, he's trying to keep up that good image in front of her, obviously not letting her know all the darkness that's associated with him and everything that he does in his past and just his life in general. So that's interesting. It does seem like, once again, it is about revenge for Smoothie. It's like he wants to get close to Haley because for him it's like, because he brought up something I thought was fascinating, was like, Nick wasn't vulnerable before, because back in season 1 and before that, Nick didn't care about anything or anyone. He was just living from drink to drink, and if he ended up dying, oh well, lo and behold, he didn't care. He didn't have any attachments. Now he cares about something, and that's Haley. So it's kind of his weakness now that Smoothie's trying to exploit. It's kind of like, oh, I love them also trying to out mess each other up by being like, oh, you can't believe how bad I'm going to mess you up. It's like, no, you can't imagine the stuff that how I'm going to go about messing you up, you know, that type of thing. We also get introduced to Janet, Nick's mom. I love that whole situation. And he'd be like, do I know you or something? It's like, me, your kid. It's your kid, and it's like, she looks nothing like me. I'm not talking about her, I'm talking about me, Ma. You don't recognize your own kid? She's like, I'm busting balls, get in here. And the introductions and stuff, I love her being like, well, I do have cancer, the big C. And, Nick was a little concerned. The doctor said I have 15 to 20 more years. And Nick's almost like, Jesus, Ma, shut up. But it's like, oh yeah, getting introduced to Haley. It's like, well, yeah, this would be the first time, wouldn't it? I mean, to be fair, because in Nick's case, he wasn't until a couple months ago he learned that he had a daughter, because he didn't know he had one this past 10 years. So, also seems like him and his mom have a complicated relationship. What exactly went down there, I have no idea. I also love that Christopher Maloney is playing Janet. I love that. I don't know why they decided to do that, just to kind of continue the weirdness of the show. I even love later on when Haley's sneaking away, one of Janet's boobs is out, and Haley has the decency to cover it up. It's like, dude, she comes from a super messed up family. I even love later on, like, Janet's explaining, like, the family, like, crest and stuff. It's two, was it dwarves, she said, who were basically crossing their itty-bitty situations, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's kind of like the Sachs family motto of kind of like, it doesn't matter how small, it's like the bigger they are, the more is going to hurt below the belt, essentially. And kind of telling Haley some stuff about Nick being like, oh, we thought he was kind of soft, which is interesting. You would never have thought Nick Sachs. You never would have thought the term soft, but when you look at that picture, it makes you wonder, does it kind of make Haley look at her dad in a different light, maybe? I don't know. It was really kind of interesting. I mean, she's slowly but surely learning more about her family. I mean, this is the only outlet she can, because obviously, like, Amanda won't tell her anything, and Nick won't tell her anything. I'm also curious, like, because it seems like Janet has some idea of what Nick is up to, because he references, like, all the trouble he's kind of gotten into, but obviously he just wants to protect Haley. And when he's trying to tell that to her, you're still being like, no, okay, I understand. I think that's her halfway understanding. I think for her, it's just kind of like, oh, you're just going to leave me behind. But, oh, you're promising to be back. Yeah, sure, I believe you. It's like, you can tell she kind of doesn't. So, and then when she goes to meet Smoothie, I thought was kind of interesting. Obviously, her getting her ears pierced and stuff like that. Like, What he's really trying to do, I don't know. Like, I guess destroy all that is Haley's innocence, so it will destroy her relationship with Nick, because she'll look at him the way he really is and kind of ruin the relationship forever, and now be the ultimate revenge of kind of, because he wants to, I guess, psychologically continue to mess Haley up, you know, to the point that maybe, like, it, you know, it's like, oh, your daughter's so messed up now and it's all your fault, and messing with Nick in that way, or making it so that she'll never look at you the same way. Because remember, Nick was her hero before, because she had a fantasized notion of what he was like, because that's all she had was that one picture and the thought of like who he was, that he was a police officer, that he was this, that he was a good person. But obviously that's kind of shattered. She wanted him in her life. That's what she wished for last season. But now it's like he's here in her life and he's nothing like she thought or hoped he would be. But you had this thing about Smoothie where he's basically like, oh, the fact of the matter is, after everything you've been through, you can no longer go back to being a naive child. You see things as they are. And you see like the Easter Bunny dude rubbing on one of the kids, and it's like, oh, some like nasty shit is going on there. So it seems like it's insinuating. And it seems like Haley is starting to see kind of like the grossness of the world, kind of, I guess, becoming jaded, almost like her dad, who's kind of gotten to that same point. But for Nick, you know, it's all about getting the Smoothie. Sunny Shine is just a step forward to get to Smoothie, because that's his main target. So that was kind of interesting. I even love that he ends up showing up at the party later on, and lo and behold, you know, he runs into Amanda there, which that's interesting. Obviously, she was drinking that juice. I guess it's like filling whatever's missing inside of her, whatever was taken from her. Maybe it's like a piece of her own soul was taken, like whatever happened in season 1. Like I said, we keep getting glimpses, but not a full picture of it. Hopefully we get a full picture soon enough. But obviously Nick was there to kill Bug. I wonder, would it be that easy? And if she did go about killing Bug, that would be inadvertently killing Sunshine, and what that would do to Haley, to a lot of people, who knows? Because Nick did bring up a good point of like how it's a situation of, this entire time, Sunshine left him alone. It's like, I was able to kind of live a normal life, just be a normal dad, but, you know, he never came after me. So, yeah, you might think I'm underestimating him, but I think he underestimated me, leaving me alive this entire time. Because it's interesting, because it's that whole thing of like, oh yeah, he's coming after the fake identity from the cab, which only Ladik knows that Sax, no one else does, not unless he's actually setting Sax up. But the fact is, I don't think he is. Because he doesn't want to be dealing with the Bug, because, you know, I wonder what made him decide to create that whole, I guess he couldn't necessarily be himself and be Sunshine, especially with everything that he's trying to build, which is kind of crazy considering all the stuff that Sunshine is kind of built off of, the manipulation and blackmail. So that's interesting. So I'm very interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. Like I said, Bug is within Nick's sight. Will it be that easy? Also, what about those other wishes? Like I said, did that other one get back? Like I said, I didn't catch at the end to see if it had rejoined the group or not. But if it's not, is it out there by itself? I'm also completely almost skipping over the whole Blue situation this episode, because basically the warden doesn't like the fact is that, you know, Blue, or rather Ocus, has got it so that every gang is cooperating. There's no issues there, but there are no issues on that front means there's issues with the guard and him. So it's kind of about his control and power. And lo and behold, the guy Blue had asked, like, yo, kill me. He does it, you know, the Big Show's character in this. He's like, I love you. And I was like, oh, I didn't know there was like actual love in this situation, which I guess in retrospect, considering the conversations they have, you can definitely see it. I thought was more of a you're my bitch type of situation, but not the case. It's like, no, there's love there. And it's like, throws himself and Blue off the roof. I don't think that's going to work. Not unless Ocus can do some stuff. We still don't really fully know what he's capable of. So probably what's most likely going to happen is the moment Blue comes conscious again, it's like, oh, he managed to survive, either because the fall wasn't enough to kill him, because Ocus kept him alive, healing his body or something, or it's just like at the last second he switched over, used his powers to stop the fall, which is also suck because I'm assuming Blue's buddy is gone. So it's just going, not only are you still alive and he's got control of your body, the only true ally you had in this situation is going too. So I am very, very interested to see where all that ends up taking us going forward. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.